Welcome to The Common Bridge, where policy and current events are discussed in a fiercely nonpartisan manner. The host, Richard Helppie, is a philanthropist, entrepreneur, and columnist who has over 1 million listeners around the world. His podcast and YouTube shows draws guests and audiences across the political spectrum.
Hi, I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we are talking to philanthropist and entrepreneur Richard Helppie, who is the man behind a wonderful podcast called Richard Helppie's Common Bridge. And Richard joins us now. Rich, thanks for joining us today.
Logan, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
My pleasure. In this highly polarized world, do we have or can we find a common bridge?
Well, there's days that I'm hopeful and there's days I'm not so hopeful. I started the Common Bridge because I just got weary of the vitriol. The Republicans attacking the Democrats attacking the Republicans, and they basically got away with not addressing the issues of the day or talking about the opportunities of the moment. They weren't talking, and I asked the question, where's our healthcare financing policy? Where's our firearms policy? Where's our student debt policy? What are the sensible climate policies? We can't get there because our political class, which is supposed to deal with these, and the reporting class that's supposed to tell us what's going on, they're not doing their jobs. They're just too busy cheerleading.
Absolutely.
And the
problem is, and I think you nailed it, is the combination of government and media feeding each other. I mean, we have this 24-hour news cycle now. And if you said to me the term firearm policy, I would say, that's gun control. Because as soon as you go to regulate guns at all, which most people would agree there should be some regulation, it's a hot topic button that is pressed and you're labeled either extreme right or extreme left. And then they get an expert on TV to talk about it and pummel you because of your moderate beliefs.
And it's that specific policy. I actually began this journey on firearms, and I said, what could be the middle ground here? And I think it's right there in the Constitution. A well-regulated militia, all right, and the right to keep and bear arms shall not be abridged. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, the way I looked at it was this: we don't give a 16-year-old a driver's license and let that 16-year-old jump in the behind the wheel of a semi-truck. All right, we don't let somebody go out and buy fireworks, that are potentially destructive unless they can show they know how to handle them, know how to store them. Physicians, they don't get to come out of medical school and go immediately into lead a brain surgery. Pilots. First license, you can fly during the day, on clear weather days, in under certain rules called visual flight rules. You don't get to fly a 757 on day one. But on firearms, if you're 18 years old, you can walk into a gun store, you can get a very powerful weapon, 1,000 rounds of ammunition, and walk out. Now, can we all at least agree that that's a little nuts?
I would think most Americans would agree to that, and that's your common bridge, that's your common ground. But the problem is, and I'll have you address this a little bit, is the news media. You've got MSNBC to the far left, you've got Fox News to the far right, and they both try to vilify the person who proposes anything that is moderate and sensible.
Well, because again, their business model is to keep you outraged. And so part of this polarization is that the right and the left, they've recruited their teams. And chief among those teams is the media alignment that, just as you've described, look, if you turn on MSNBC, you know what they're going to say. It's comical how predictable they are. Similarly with Fox. All right, CNN also went over to the far left, and they've announced a change in their business model at CNN. They're going to report the news. Who would have thought a company with the name News in the middle of it would actually be reporting the news? But it's a bold step. I hope they actually do it. but part of this recruiting of the teams doesn't allow dialogue. So just to finish up on the firearms, I said, why don't we have graduated gun licensing? You can get your first firearm. It can be maybe a revolver, limited, 6 shots, limited caliber. Prove you can handle that. Test, train for the next one. Maybe it's a semi-automatic handgun. Of course, deer rifles would come in here, shotguns would come in here. And so over a period of time, you qualify for a more powerful weapon. And had this policy been in place, nearly all of these tragic shootings would have been prevented. Okay. The guy that went and shot up the grocery store in Boulder, first gun purchased, walked in, bought the gun, walked into a grocery store, killed 10 people. Okay. The kid in Florida that killed those kids in the Parkland High School walked into a gun store, first gun, walked out with 1,000 rounds of ammunition and a semi-automatic rifle. Where does anybody think that's a good idea? And what do you think the clerk that sold that to that young man was thinking? I can't believe that they didn't have some twinge of this can't end well. That's where I'm going. But we can't have those kind of discussions because one side wants to say you're going to take away all my guns. The other side says you want to have free fire zones. And tragically, we're now seeing places where they're eliminating even reasonable measures for background checks and permitting for concealed carry. This can't end well. But again, it's that building of the team. So you've got the political parties have found that that's more popular than actually doing work. The media finds they can get eyeballs and readers and clicks by doing the same thing. And then what they do is they're going to attack the other voters, okay, or the other political persuasions. They're going to claim certain demographics as their own, which is insane, as if, we might be described by our ancestral heritage similarly, but I bet there's lots of things we don't agree about.
Right.
Then they're going to line up their social media support. They're each going to come in with their own brand of censorship. And now we're going further apart. And the really tragic part of this is it just opens the door for corruption. Because instead of, as when you did your work at CBS, I would imagine that it wouldn't matter if it was a Republican, it was a Democrat, an independent, or something else. If something was shady, they feared that you were going to ask questions about it. You were going to exercise some journalistic curiosity. I don't think they really fear that anymore in general.
And it's interesting because you had, for example, Jim Acosta from CNN being a pit bull against Trump his whole presidency, which is fine so long as Jim Acosta is also a pit bull against Biden.
Precisely.
And we haven't seen that kind of vitriol, as you mentioned, against Biden. We saw it a lot against Trump. Biden's been given more or less a free pass. He's scrutinized here and there, primarily by Fox, but it seems like CNN and MSNBC are his apologizers.
Well, it's an unusual presidency that was brought about as a result of an unusual period in time. I don't think the country said, you know what, we need this very aging Joe Biden because out of the 330 million of it, that's our best choice. But I think people wanted to get off the Trump train. Okay. How did Trump get there? People didn't want Hillary Clinton to be president. Okay. Pretty simple. And if you go through some of the voting data, it's really apparent that that's what happened, with, the top of the ticket voting, for one party, but voting for the other right down the ballot, which demonstrates they didn't want Clinton, didn't want Trump. The similarities go beyond that. Each of the major two parties in the last two presidential elections, their losing candidate claimed the election was stolen from them.
Right.
Hillary Clinton said it in 18. She said it again in 19. Donald Trump has been saying it. And all of this polarization, and we've had close elections before, 1960, 2000, ultimately those got resolved. In each of the last two elections, the losing candidate from the major party has claimed that the election was stolen from them.
Thank you for listening or watching this segment of Richard Helppie's The Common Bridge. On Substack, you can access the full archive and bonus columns, podcasts, and interviews for only $5 a month. At substack.com, search for The Common Bridge and subscribe.